Rebecca McLean and I'm an assistant health psychologist at Healthy Dialogues, and we've been working with Thrive London to put together this mental health awareness training for frontline staff. This training is made up of 3 modules. We're going to start with Module A. So I'm going to be taking you through Module A, where we'll be looking at what mental health is and where we can find support. This first session is an information giving session before we move on to the more skills-based training in Modules B and C. In Module A, we're going to start looking at what mental health is and where we can find support. So we'll be covering the psychosocial model of mental health and well-being, 5 ways to well-being, the impact of stigma related to financial hardships and its impact on mental well-being, as well as where we can appropriately access support and information for mental health and financial hardships. So when we talk about mental health, it's important to note that mental health is more than just mental illness. It's a state of well-being. There may be times when our mental health is good, and there may be times when we're struggling or we have a mental health problem. This is something we can move up and down on. We don't just stay in one place in terms of our mental health. So what is the estimated prevalence of common mental health disorders in London? It's about 22.5%, so nearly a quarter of people in London have a common mental health disorder. So this includes things like depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. It's about 16.9% for the rest of England, so we can see it's a lot higher in London than it is in England. We know that there are a lot of inequalities in mental health, so mental health does not affect people equally. Our ethnicity, our gender, and our socioeconomic status, as well as a lot of other factors, can influence our likelihood to develop a mental health problem. So it's been shown that people from Black and mixed ethnic groups are more likely to develop a common mental disorder. Those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds are more likely to have a mental health problem. And men are more likely to die by suicide than women, although women are more likely to access psychological therapies than men. One way in which we can explain why these differences occur is the psychosocial model of mental health. So this is a move away from that more traditional medical model, which focuses mostly on the influence that biological factors have on our mental health and well-being. Instead, we're trying to understand how the experiences that we have and how we understand and respond to those experiences can influence our mental health and well-being. So in this model, it's made up of psychological factors and social factors. So psychological factors are at the individual level, and they're the ways in which we think and feel. This includes things like resilience, so the ability to bounce back from challenges, adversities, or crises. It also includes our coping skills, so this is the skills that we use to respond to stress. Our self-esteem and our attitudes and beliefs are also psychological factors. We also have social factors, so these are things like our family, our peer relationships, our socioeconomic status, our work, whatever social support we have available. So psychological factors and social factors can also be linked, so we call these psychosocial factors. They're not completely independent of each other, they interact. How can we improve our well-being? Well, I'm sure we all do things to improve our well-being. It might be that we go for a walk, it might be that we meet up with friends, it might be that we sit down and watch our favourite TV show. We all do things to improve our well-being. 5 Ways to Wellbeing is something that was developed by the New Economics Foundation, so it's essentially 5 actions that we can take to boost our well-being. This isn't a treatment for mental disorders or illness, but they're things that when we do them regularly, they can make us feel better. So the 5 ways to well-being are to connect with others, to take notice, to be active, to keep learning, and to give to others. So connecting with others. So we know that having good relationships with others improves our mental well-being. It gives us a sense of belonging and self-worth, and it gives us chances to share positive experiences with other people. It can also provide us with emotional support and give us opportunities to do the same for others. When we think about our relationships, we think about the close relationships that we have. So these are our friends and our family. These are very high quality relationships, and these are very important for our mental well-being. But what we often forget are the broad relationships. So these are more superficial relationships. So our neighbours, our acquaintances, other people in our community. And these people provide a sense of belonging in the community, so they are important. So how can we connect with other people? Well, it might be that we spend time with our families. It might be that we go out with friends. We could volunteer or join a club or social group. It could also be something as simple as having a chat with the person at the checkout at the supermarket. We could also use technology, so things like Skype and FaceTime, to speak to people that don't live near us. Our next way to well-being is take notice. So this is essentially being aware of thoughts and feelings, our body, and the world around us. And it's part of mindfulness. So when we're taking notice, it's something that we can do throughout our day, or it could be something that we schedule time for. Doing this can help us to reduce negative thoughts by focusing on the present moment. It can also help us to manage stress by teaching us to regulate our thoughts. It can also make us feel more positively about life and help us to appreciate the things that we have and help us to think about what's important to us. So how can we take notice? Well, it could be something that we do as we're walking to work or eating a meal. We could just stop and think about what we're doing or what we're seeing. It could be something like yoga or practicing gratitude or meditation as well. So it can be something small or it can be something bigger. It really depends on you and what you prefer. Being physically active. So we've known for a long time how important physical activity is for our physical health. And now we're starting to understand how important it is for our mental health as well. It boosts our self-esteem and it can give us a goal to work towards or achieve, which gives us that sense of purpose. It can also help us to respond better to stress by reducing stress hormones, and it can improve our mood by boosting the production of endorphins, which are chemicals in the brain that make us feel good. So how can we be more physically active? It could be something as simple as going for a walk or getting up to go and speak to someone in the office instead of emailing them. We could take the stairs instead of the lift. Or if we have the time and we feel ready, we could join a sports club or go to the gym. Our next way to well-being is to keep learning. So learning new things boosts our self-esteem and our self-confidence. It gives us a sense of purpose and it can provide us with opportunities to connect with others. It can also help us to improve our knowledge and broaden our minds. So keep learning could be learning a new skill, or it could just be picking up an old hobby. It could be taking on more responsibility at work or at home as well. So we might do things like a course at work, or it could be that we start a DIY project or a house-related project. We could learn a new recipe, or we could read a book. There are a lot of different things that we can do to keep learning, and they can be big or they can be small. Our last way to well-being is to give to others. So giving to others can be rewarding. It can give us a sense of purpose, and it can provide us with opportunities to meet and connect with others. So giving to others could be volunteering, or it could be offering emotional support to friends and family. Could also be helping a friend or family with a project that they need help with. So as we can see, there are a lot of things that we can do to help boost our well-being. And hopefully you can start to see the links between that psychosocial model that we talked about earlier and the 5 ways to well-being. Because when we look at why these 5 actions can help our well-being, we can see that actually a lot of them are psychological and social factors. So things like social support and peer relationships, as well as helping our self-esteem and helping us to cope with stress. So now I'm going to take you through some places that you can seek help for mental health problems. The first one is Good Thinking. So Good Thinking is an NHS approved wellbeing service which offers digital support through self-assessments, workbooks and apps. So these are online tools rather than being a one-to-one support service. Good Thinking is designed for Londoners, but it can be accessed by anyone across the UK. They also have apps as well as other information on mental wellbeing and mental health. We also have IAPT, so this stands for Improving Access to Psychological Therapies. So this is an NHS commissioned service and we have them all across the UK. So they provide evidence-based therapies for symptoms of anxiety and depression. So you can self-refer to IAPT or you can be referred by a healthcare professional. It might be important to note if you are signposting or referring someone to IAPT that they do have very long waiting lists, so it's important to manage their expectations. So now we've covered mental health and what mental health is, I just want to move on now to talking about the cost of living crisis and the impact of financial hardship. So according to a recent report from the Greater London Authority, 89% of Londoners say that their cost of living has increased over the last 6 months, while 17% of Londoners say that they are financially struggling, and a further 30% say that they are only just managing. 31% of Londoners say that they are buying less food and essentials to manage living costs. while 45% of Londoners are using less water, energy, or fuel to manage their living costs. So we can see that the cost of living crisis is impacting a huge percentage of people in London. So what effects might this have? Well, I want to touch on stigma and just give a brief definition of what stigma is. So stigma is a negative attitude that someone has of a characteristic or personal trait that's considered to be a disadvantage. Stigma can be external, so it can come from others, or it can be internalized. So this is when we begin to believe that stigma and we let it form how we see ourselves. There's a lot of stigma attached to having financial hardships, so sometimes we might feel like it's our fault that we're struggling or that we deserve the situation that we're in. And this can make it really difficult for us to seek help. There's actually been some research showing that people don't want to use food banks or seek help for fuel poverty because of stigma, shame, and embarrassment. So where does stigma about financial hardships come from? Well, we think of there as being three types of stigma. So the first one is institutional stigma. So this is the media, laws, policies, education. We also have social stigma. So this is public attitudes. So we might think of things that we see on social media or conversations that we have with others. We also have personal stigma. So this is when the stigma comes from ourselves. So what impacts might stigma have? Well, we might feel ashamed or embarrassed as a result of stigma. There's been some research showing the impact of shame related to financial hardships. A financial shame spiral is essentially when we're in a difficult financial situation and we feel shame about it. We can make our financial situation worse because we do something called financial withdrawing. So this is when we avoid any sort of financial information. So we might not open bills, we might not answer the phone, we might not check our bank account. Essentially, we're sticking our head in the sand. But because of this, we're at a higher likelihood of making financial decisions which are counterproductive. So we might continue to spend money and we might end up placing ourselves in further debt. And this can make our financial situation worse, which causes us to feel more shame. And then we withdraw further and it can become a cycle. There's not been too much research around how to break this cycle, but one thing that has been shown to work is engaging in self-affirmations. So this is when we think about what is good about ourselves and reflect on our core values. When we think about guilt, we think of it as being I have done something bad, while shame is I am bad. When we think about what is good about ourselves, we're able to see that bigger picture and see ourselves as more than just our shame or our financial situation. So this might be something that you see in your personal life or in your work. It might be something that you recognize. Along with shame and stigma, we can also experience a lot of fear, anxiety, and stress around financial hardships, particularly if we're afraid of losing our homes or being chased by debt collectors or bailiffs, or possibly not being able to afford food or pay our monthly household bills. How might this fear, stress, and anxiety impact our behavior? Well, we might withdraw from social situations, or we might not want to leave our home, or potentially we don't feel safe at home. We can also have higher levels of risk-taking behaviors as well. So there's been a lot of research showing the link between financial hardships and mental health. So economic recessions have been linked to worsened psychological well-being, increased prevalence of common mental disorders, and higher levels of suicidal behaviors. Fuel poverty has been associated with poor mental health. Unemployment has been linked to increased use of mental health services, and being in debt has been linked to higher levels of depressive symptoms. So this relationship can work both ways. So financial hardships can lead to mental health problems, and having mental health problems can place us at higher risk of financial hardship. How might mental health problems contribute to financial hardships? Well, there are many factors that can put people with mental health problems at higher risk of financial hardships. Some of these factors include things like people with mental health problems struggling to engage with communication channels. So things like speaking face to face or on the phone to someone can be difficult. People with mental health problems are also more likely to be unemployed or underemployed, so in lower paid roles. And this can put them at higher risk of financial hardship because they'll have less income. And some people with mental health problems can also experience increased impulsivity and memory problems depending on their mental health problem. And this can make financial management more difficult and lead to them having increased spending. How might financial hardships impact mental health? Well, there are a lot of different ways in which financial hardships can influence our mental health. So thinking back to that psychosocial model that we talked about at the very beginning, There are a few reasons for this relationship, and they include things like feelings of shame or embarrassment impacting our self-esteem and attitudes, the experience of stress, fear, or anxiety, and if we don't have the skills to cope with that, that can impact our mental health and well-being. We might also withdraw from social situations because of embarrassment and shame, which can cause us to have less social support available or to not be engaging with that social support. It could also be that actually we can't afford to take part in activities that improve our well-being and our mental health. When we think back to that 5 ways to well-being, a lot of the activities cost money, and if we don't have that, then we can't take part in them, and that can lead to us not being able to improve our mental health and well-being, and therefore having worse mental health. And it can also reduce our opportunities for social interaction as well, leading us to being more isolated. So just as we're getting to the end of this session, I wanted to go through a few places that can offer debt advice and support, as well as help to access welfare benefits, housing, and food. So Debt-Free Advice, Step Change, and Money Helper all offer free debt advice. Christians Against Poverty offer free professional debt help. Turn to Us help people in financial hardships to gain access to welfare benefits, charitable grants, and other financial help. Shelter help people with housing issues and homelessness. The Trust will Trust support a network of food banks, and they provide emergency food and support. And Citizens Advice offer a lot of free confidential advice for a range of different financial hardship and financial wellbeing topics. So that brings us to the end of Module A, where we've been looking at what mental health is, where we can find support, and the impact of financial hardships. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope it's been useful. Thank you so much for listening, and keep in touch.